All right, everyone. So thank you again for joining us today. A couple of quick housekeeping items. We have muted all attendees. This is in a listen-only mode. Do feel free to use the Q&A button at the bottom of Zoom to submit your questions. The intent today is to solicit questions from you, the audience, so that our panelists of 6 IT, CEO, and business owners can answer them for you and help you through this situation. Additionally, we have enabled the chat box today, so feel free to share any resources or any information there with each other. Questions directed to Q&A, chat box is available if there's things you want to share with others in the audience. So just a quick high-level introduction of our panelists before we get started. As I said, we have 6 IT support firm CEOs and business owner on with us today. We have Charles Henson with Nashville Computer. We have Will Nobles of Vector Choice Technology Solutions. We have Willie Kearns of SmartPath Technologies. We have Pedro Nunez of IT Management Solutions. We have Ross Brous of Continuous Networks. And we have Sonny Clark of Acumen Technology. So we've got people from Nashville to Atlanta to New Jersey to New Hampshire and in Kentucky. So pretty good cross-section of the United States with us today here. So the topic for this webinar is fairly simple. As leaders and business owners, we need to know how do we ensure that both our employees are supported and our data is protected as we've quickly had to pivot to working remotely in light of COVID-19. As I've worked with business owners throughout North America over these past couple weeks, several of them have reached out to me with varying topics regarding what to do from a health standpoint, what to do from a financial standpoint, and a common one that they don't seem to have many answers for is the technology piece. So I thought it'd be good for us to get these 6 experts together on the call today and share with all of you what they're seeing, as well as answer the questions that you have. So a couple questions that just came through the chat, and thank you, Charles, for responding. Yes, this will be recorded, so you're welcome to rewatch and share with your teams. Also, we will be sending out resources and a blog post recapping the highlights from our time together. So as we jump in today to get started, my first question, Will, why don't we start with you, is what are the common issues that you're encountering with the companies that you support as they're quickly transitioning from working in primarily an office environment to the majority, if not all of their team, working from home?
Yeah, I think that most of them are trying to figure out, if they've never worked from home before, how to communicate back and forth between their employees, and really educating them on Zoom or Teams or some kind of video conferencing chat to get them used to that. I've had a lot of calls with people saying, how do I do this? What do I do? How do I communicate with my employees? And you know, that's really the biggest thing, is how to communicate with employees at this point.
So you're seeing people wondering about how to communicate and interact in lieu of those physical interactions?
Yes, you know, and one of the things is we've always worked remote. We've got 4 offices, so we've always worked remote. So we've used Zoom, and so we're so used to it that it's common nature to us now. So I think getting the owners of businesses knowing that, hey, their employees can work from home, but you can still have that face-to-face interaction with them.
That's great. Yeah, we've actually, a couple of the companies that we're coaching are doing, like through Zoom, they're replacing those common lunches that they will by having a Zoom bridge up during lunch so remote people can work together. And communication is very critical in that.
We have happy hour this afternoon at 5 o'clock with my whole staff via Zoom.
There you go. Right. Send that link out. We'll all join you, right? Very good. Ross, what about you? What are you hearing from your clients in terms of the challenges that they're facing as they're transitioning to working primarily remotely?
Yeah, you know, we've got a lot of people who were not accustomed to working remotely. And so some of these, we work in co-managed environments a lot where we're working with on-site IT people. And in some of those situations, they've just been handed laptops and said, here, go work. And okay, how? How do I log into my systems? How do I get access to anything? How do I get my phone calls? And so I think along with what Will said, there's a huge challenge with communication, but there's a huge concern around security that we're facing now as well, that I think just didn't exist in the same light that it did even a couple of weeks ago. And we're expecting a massive uptick in the number of attacks that are going to take place over the coming weeks and months. And, just an education perspective more for those IT people that are managing things and the owners of those businesses, so they can understand what to expect and some of the real easy things they can do to stop it. So I think there's a lot of communication from them about the concerns around these things and how to keep those people working securely.
That's a good insight. We're going to get to some of those security pieces in a minute. And as I mentioned earlier, feel free to submit your questions to the Q&A box here. Ross, I'm curious, as you talk about, people saying, here's a laptop, get to work. Are there any resources out there or anything that you've found that we can share with our audience of how to answer some of those questions, or even what some of those basic questions are that people need to know as they start working remotely, instead of just, sort of that two-part training of good luck and hang in there, here's your laptop, go do it?
Yeah, and I do believe that a lot of that is just around access to data, access to systems that they're using, and access to communication. We've seen Microsoft offer Office 365 now for free for a period of time. We've seen Zoom doing these offers for free. These tech companies are out there offering these tools to make these people to make everybody more functional. For the employee, like the end user, I don't know if this is big of a question for them as it is for the people that are managing them, but how do I access things securely? And I think there are tools that they need to work with their IT vendors or their IT people to make that happen. It's a huge part of what we've done over the past 2 weeks. We've been pulling 16-hour days just getting people set up with that secure remote access, so they don't actually have to access data from their laptop. They can do it securely with their office computer.
Oh, got it. Okay, good. And then Sunny, what about you? What are you seeing or hearing from your clients as they're going through this transition? What challenges are you hearing from them?
So while many of our clients were working remotely, the ones that were not, it was getting them laptops and getting them the gear they need to work remotely. There's a logistics problem right now. All these items are constrained. Webcams, headsets, the ones you find on Amazon right now, you'll see they're all a lot more expensive than they were, 3 weeks ago. So logistics, getting them what they need to work remotely. And then the users who are not used to working remotely, the ones that were doing it already, they're great. It's the ones who don't do it, who now have to VPN in order to get access. It's that learning curve that you're now teaching these people, and you're doing it all at one time. It's that challenge of teaching these people how to do this right now. That's why I urge you to do that.
Got it. Yeah, I've heard and experienced constraints with hardware. I definitely heard about laptops. Webcams make sense. I hadn't heard that yet. Are there any particular resources that you're aware of out there that may be good places to look as people are short of finding them?
Now, like Dell Outlet, and instead of just going to your traditional, they're going to the manufacturer's outlet stores to get some stuff. That's what we've seen happening now.
Okay, so like outlets where they have either open units or refurbished, just something you can get that wouldn't be the primary source initially?
Right. As a company, you might not normally do that, but now you're doing it because you need to get a laptop or you need to get a headset, et cetera. Yeah.
No, that's good insight. Willie, what about you? Have you heard anything as far as where people can find those hardware items that are out of stock through most normal channels?
I've heard that a lot of the traditional e-commerce retail vendors, the Newegg.coms and those kind of things, still have stock, at least right now. From a little bit of what I hear, once their stock is depleted, getting replacement stock in may be an issue. But I have heard that that a lot of those kind of places, that e-commerce, traditional regular e-commerce websites, still are shipping Monoprice. Actually, I had a client yesterday who ordered 30 webcams off of Monoprice, and they're supposed to arrive over the weekend. So there are still some out there, but they're becoming much harder to find. And not only just remote technology equipment overall, the supply chain is kind of constrained right now. You can definitely tell.
Well, that's good. Cool. Ross, a question just came in from Stephen Wagner. And just a reminder, guys, go ahead and throw those in the Q&A box versus the chat. He was responding to your comment about Office 365 and that offer you're talking about where they're extending it at a discounted rate. Do you know if that's something that's available publicly or for specific industries? Can you provide any additional insight on that?
I actually just posted the link to it on their website. So if you click on that link, you can read all about it.
Very cool. Thank you. And then Charles, what about you? I know you support a number of different industries. Are there any particular industries you're finding that are less prepared to work at home? And what are some examples of you working with them through this transition?
Yeah, well, manufacturing, obviously they've got employees that have desktops. They have the traditional servers in their closet. They didn't want to go to cloud because a lot of their applications run on premise. And so those guys have really not been prepared. Just like Sonny said, we're having a really hard time finding laptops. You know, we've had to pass up multiple opportunities to sell equipment because the companies had to outsource it. You know, they had to find 5 laptops here and 3 from there, and they are buying refurbished machines. So that's becoming a problem. And then we have a couple of clients that are in industries that are specific, like around entertainment, and they're having a decline also in being able to perform their jobs. And a lot of the work that they do for their clients, even though they're trying to work from home, it's that connectivity back to the office, because again, they have a lot of desktops. Several of our CPA practices that we work with in the past few years, we've been encouraging them to get laptops with the SSD drive, so it's much quicker, so that in the event that they need to go out and do an audit, they want to go work from home, or if they have a sick kid, whatever, even during tax season, that they can work from home. So those businesses are striving right now because they were already kind of prepared. But anybody that's had the traditional desktop and servers, and I kind of want to go back to, I want to make sure that we talk about this, and I don't know if it's in your list of questions. Ross was talking about, you know, accessing data. That's been a big thing. And what we're seeing and what we're encouraging people to do is make sure that you're not letting employees use their free Dropbox account, because now you have no idea where your business data is going, who has it, how it's being accessed. And if you have to terminate an employee, or if they leave or whatever, you know, they leave your office, then you no longer have access to that data, and your data, your client information has actually left your building. So I want to make sure that we do talk about that during this session today.
Yep, so we're going to get into security in just a minute. In fact, some of those questions are already starting to come in. I am curious, there was talk about Zoom and Slack and Teams. A question came in around, specifically around Microsoft Teams. Is there anybody on here that uses that or is familiar with that software? So Ross, Will, I see you raise your hands. Pedro, what about you? Is there a specific feature within Microsoft Teams that you're finding is handy? Is there a tip or two that you could share with people that they could utilize within Teams today with their teams as they're remote?
Yeah. So for we use Zoom like many other companies out there, but internally for your own business, we use Hangout. We also have Office 365, and we use Teams to basically make sure our team are always in front of each other, so we can see each other. We kind of create this room, and we're all there, and we feel like we're all in the same room. Number one, that's one way to hold people accountable and being sure that everybody's productive during these times. From an outside perspective, you know, Teams can be utilized to actually, like I said, use it internally. But I recommend that anybody out there that has a business and wants to have meeting with their clients, use something like Zoom. This is a lot easier to be able to actually connect people from the outside to communicate with you. If you have Teams, they're gonna have to create a Microsoft account, and that's a little bit complex to get that, to get through that, you know, step. So that's what we've been doing.
So I heard you say you're setting up rooms internally in your organization to communicate with one another, and you can just pop in there, like I was just talking about with Will earlier around setting up a room in Zoom for lunch, or a happy hour today at 5 o'clock, right? So you're using Teams in a similar fashion?
Yeah, we use Teams, you know, but we use a lot of Zoom because it's a lot easier, right? You can still do it with both, but I like to simplify things. For our sake, we have a room that's open 24/7 for our staff. It's called Remote Force, and we all there. Everybody can see each other. Now we do meetings with our client that's separate, but one of the most important things to do is basically daily huddles. So we do daily huddles in the morning. We check back again around noon, and then we do a debrief at the end of the day. So that's really important, constant communication.
Got it. So you're doing 3 huddles a day instead of just the standard one, and you're jumping into that room within Teams to accomplish that.
That is correct.
That's great. Ross, you had your hand up too. What about you? Is there a tip or something you can share with the team around how to use Teams?
Yeah, definitely. And this is along the lines of the whole business planning to-dos aspect that I'm guessing a lot of people on this webinar know something about. We've integrated Microsoft Planner, which comes with most of the Office 365 accounts that you have. It's tasks.office.com, and you can have that completely integrated into Microsoft Teams. So what we've done for all of our departments is set up these Kanban boards where we can assign tasks to ourselves and to other people. So managers are able to assign tasks to the employees and monitor and maintain everything that's going on from a productivity perspective. That's been a huge game changer for us, using that feature inside of Microsoft Teams, and we're getting a whole lot more done. In fact, we've moved all of our business planning to-dos out of some of the tools we had been using and put those entirely in Microsoft Planner.
Wow, that's impressive. I wasn't aware of that. Thanks for sharing. Marshall brought up a question around computer security, things like two-factor authentication, whether or not it's best to shut off your computer if you're not using it, and how often should you disconnect from the current internet connection. Will, do you have any thoughts around that, specifically around two-factor authentication and what that looks like?
Yeah, so two-factor authentication, regardless of working remotely or in the office, pretty much it needs to be required these days. We use Duo for two-factor, and we use that with our Azure AD integration, with all our websites and third-party websites that we can, make two-factor. So that's highly recommended, no matter in the environment that we're in today or the normal world that we're accustomed to. From a computer standpoint, I would say, it's each company is going to handle it different. Like, we asked our clients to leave their computers on at night. That's when we do our maintenance. We do all the patching, security patching, and reboots of the machines. So when they come in the mornings, it's not super slow. So it all depends on if the computers are being managed by your outsourced IT or your internal IT staff, how that policy should go. To me, leaving them on and letting all the work done at night is better, so you can be more effective during the day.
That's good insight. Willie, what have you seen around that, around companies leaving computers on, either remote computers or computers they're remoting into? Do you have any comments there?
Yeah, kind of like Will said, we actually find the same thing, that leaving them on in the evening provides the ability to perform maintenance and do things that otherwise may impact people's productivity throughout the day. One thing that during this whole working remotely thing that we've ran into a little bit, are people who only have laptops, people who have desktops, and people who have laptops and desktops. And what we're finding a lot of times is, if a user has a desktop at the office and a laptop at home, for example, or a laptop they take back and forth with them, they're really wanting to get connected back to their work desktop because it's what they're familiar with. It's where they know their icons are on the left side and Word is the second one on the second row, that kind of thing. And so when you start to think about, how do you most efficiently work remotely, a lot of times it answers, do you leave computers on? That kind of thing.
That's good insight. Thank you. Yeah, I was talking with a CEO friend of mine who was having issues where computers were turning off that they were remoting into. And as a result, they've now installed, I don't know if it's actually Wemo or some type of a smart outlet to toggle the power outlets that computers are plugged into in the office. I thought that was a really neat tip, is how they can actually turn computers on or off by toggling that outlet remotely in the event that a computer shuts off, without having to go into the office and sacrifice somebody's health or safety at this point in time. Sonny, what about you? I mean, there's been talks earlier about security. Have you seen any unique or new or different potential phishing schemes or attacks through this crisis? I know it's fairly new, but anything that you've seen come through that's different in the past couple weeks than before?
We haven't experienced one yet. I think they are coming, and I think a lot of people on here too probably use the phishing testing, where you're getting them anyway through a service like KnowBe4 or one of those services. So I do think it's important to remind everybody while they're home to be aware of those, because they are coming, and I'm sure they're out there. We just haven't seen one yet. And you hit on multi-factor authentication. That's the single best thing they can do to help with a phishing attempt, is have that turned on. And always reminding people they're not bugging IT if they call to ask if this email's okay. Call your boss, call your manager, call. If you get email from Charles, pick up the phone, call Charles. Charles, did you send this? It's never a bother to call and ask versus clicking it and calling and say, I clicked it, that's probably the biggest thing people can do is just knowing it's okay to call and ask because they think they're bothering you or something. I'd much rather get that call than the other call, so just being aware.
Right now we need excuses to talk to each other, right? So use those opportunities to pick up the phone and make that call. Sonny, you mentioned, different testing services. There was one that you mentioned there. Can you repeat it again? I just want to make sure the audience here hears those.
Okay, yeah, KnowBe4. And again, that's one of many where it sends out tests once a week or however often you schedule them, just to test people to make sure that it gamifies the phishing attempts, right? So you can see if your people, not to get them in trouble, but to make them aware of it and teach them, hey, this was a phishing email and here's why. And just to help you as a management team. And there's other ones out there. These guys have probably mentioned some other ones. That's just one I know off the top of my head. But it gamifies the phishing attempts for your employees and reports on them so you can see who's doing it and who's more likely to do it.
I'm definitely hearing a theme around training. I'll get to you in a second, Charles. Ross was talking about training people as they get a laptop, maybe for the first time that they've primarily had a desktop and they're taking that home. You're talking about, training in terms of spotting those phishing attempt emails. Charles, you wanted to chime in with something?
Yeah, a couple of things. It's a good time to remind people that not to send, PII information, personal, identifiable information inside of a plain text email. And so Terry, does our books. She this week, and she said, "Hey, did you send me an email earlier? It looked funny." And so I had her send it to me, and I said, "No, I didn't send that." And we blocked them. We blocked the sender. But one of the scams that I've seen, and I'll be making a video about this, is right now they're doing the census, the 2020 census. And what I saw was it's a relative that posted hey, in order to get your stimulus check, you need to go to this website and fill in your information. Well, number one, the government already knows where you live. They already know how many people are in your household, unless you're not filing your taxes. But the problem is, there's sites that are set up out there, like the official site is my2020census.gov, which is oddly strange, but it is a gov site. But they're setting up like census2020.com and some of these others, and they're looking for people to come fill in their information. So again, it goes back to education. Tell your users, if you see something that looks funny, never send us anything in clear text. Even if I send you, even if you're normally doing wire transfers, make sure that you have a new policy in place, and that is to leave out a few of the digits in the wire so that you have to call prior to sending the wire to get the missing digits from the routing codes. And, just pick up the phone and call. You want to talk to somebody anyway because you're isolated at home. It'd be a good time to call them and say, hey, did you really send this? And can I confirm the amounts, and can I confirm the accounts and the routing numbers and whatever else? And, we see people sending emails all the time asking for the date of birth, social security numbers, and home addresses of all employees so we can run a background check. That's not something you'd want to send in a typical email anyways. So you should have those policies and procedures in place. So it's all about education.
That's great, Charles. It's somewhat ironic, though not shocking to me, that we have technical experts on a call here, and we're talking about human behavior and training, right? It's not the deep-rooted technical configuration pieces that you guys are saying are the real best practices of what we can go do. I also love that you're talking about how, there are going to be scams related to COVID-19 and different things there, and there are other just sort of run-of-the-mill things we need to be cautious of, given how stretched thin and in many cases worried and stressed the general population is. Sonny, you had something you wanted to add as well?
Charles mentioned PHI, and to add on to that, when our workers are using our laptops and our desktops at the office, for all of our clients, we have the management gives us the written policies, and then we create technical rules to help enforce some of those written policies, whether it's in the firewall or using Active Directory. One of the downsides of these guys working remote, if they don't have a laptop or they're working from the desktop, is some of these policies are no longer enforceable, but the users might have gotten used to them not being able to do these things. So it might be a good time to remind them that, hey, remember, don't do these 8 things. Don't send out PHI, don't send out routing numbers, etc., because we can't technically block them on some services now.
Great point. Okay, so we've got a couple couple really tactical questions here, looking for vendor recommendations, which makes a ton of sense right now. Pedro, I'll share this one with you. So as far as password managers, are there any that you typically recommend? Any idea on what they usually cost, or what you recommend either from an individual or business perspective that are out there?
We use LastPass. We use LastPass for to manage our own credentials, because it allows you to track what kind of passwords you have, and it tells you in alert and saying, hey, you've been using the same password on multiple different sites. So it kind of helps you out. And one of the things that security is not about convenience, right? It's about being secure. So, one of the things that I like about LastPass is that you can have it generate a password for you, and then it stores it. And that way it forces you to always have a unique password for each one of those locations, for each one of those sites. So that's what we like to use.
Okay, so you're a big fan of LastPass.
Yeah.
Anybody else have, anybody else use something other than LastPass that we can recommend to folks here?
I use LastPass, but one of the things, even with a password database for security, is as good as you make it. Make your password tough and long, and as well as put two-factor authentication in front of that as well.
The good thing about LastPass is there's also an app for your phone, so you can have it. There's a plugin for your web browser. The paid version, I want to say, if I remember correctly, it's like $10 a month or something. It's not very expensive. But the cool thing is if you have somebody, like I have somebody helping with social media, and they need access to my accounts, I can share my username and password with them, and I can mask the password so they can't see the password. Or I could open it up to where they could see the password if it's a family member or somebody else that I'm working with. But it's one repository for all access to all my things, and it does have one master password that you need to remember. So it's a good program.
Yeah,
all right, so pretty unanimous. You got Pedro? Yep.
One thing that I was going to mention, even though you have LastPass for the audience, you also have to have a good cybersecurity strategy in place, and that's composed of multiple different layers. So if you get a keylogger on your network and he's just sitting there norm listening to what you're typing, if they get a hold of your LastPass password, then you're out of luck. So you also have to think about, okay, I have this for password generation and managing all that, but then how do I cover what's happening at the local level here on my computer, right? So you need to also think about the different type of things that you need to have in place. It's not just malware, you know, there's at least 3 or 4 different layers. So we can talk about it later on, but just think about that.
Yep. So LastPass has clearly hit a nerve, because we've got a few questions that are coming in on that. So just real quick responses. Anybody take this who feels they've got a good answer. What's the best practice for using LastPass between work and personal? I use one for both and probably shouldn't, but maybe now it's too late. What do you guys recommend around that?
I have a personal
Pedro,
account.
raise your hand. Go ahead.
Yeah. So you have a Gmail account with you know, so it's for your personal stuff. Use LastPass for that. And then for all your business stuff, you LastPass for the other. I know it's kind of tough because, once again, convenience, right? But it's the best thing to do. If you're working and you want to do multiple different things, then maybe open up a Chrome browser for your business stuff, and then open up, you know, Firefox or Mozilla and have LastPass there with your personal stuff. And that way, you know, you don't have to be switching between 2 different accounts. So just you know,
okay, so you're recommending definitely separate those 2 accounts, and if you're looking to use the same computer for work and personal related logins, you could use 2 different browsers and log into the respective LastPass accounts.
Got it.
Good, that's helpful. And then another question, Richard asked, how are you battling passwords in clear text when using LastPass? Engineers can easily see the masked passwords. Anybody have a comment on that?
I don't know how they would see it. There's a check mark when you go to share the password that says allow recipient to view the password. If you put a check mark there, or if you don't, I forget which way it is, but it masks the password so they can't see it. So what happens is the person that you're sharing the password with also has to have a LastPass account. And with that account, that's how they would log into the site. So using LastPass, there's a button there that says launch and enter credentials for you. And that's the feature that they would be using. So they would not actually see the password. Now, one other note.
Got it. So
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say one other note to make is any of your accounts that allow for notifications, like my Gmail, Facebook, LinkedIn, any of those accounts, I have it set up to notify me anytime somebody logs in. Therefore, if anybody ever logs into my account, I get a notification of it. There's a lot of like DNS hosting and other sites that allow that information sent to you. And so I highly recommend that you set that up as well.
All right, so what I heard is that if you use those, go get there, Pedro, if we use those, if we use a paid account, then there's the ability for you to share that in a secure fashion, and that's how you've gotten around it. Richard, looks like you've got a real technical answer there. So if you want, you go ahead and shoot me an email, Ryan@PetraCoach. I'll forward it on, and I can put you in touch with Charles or others on the panel here to get that detailed question answered around it. All right, and Pedro, you had something you want to chime in?
Yeah, I was gonna say, just to add to what Charles was saying. So we use like many different vendors for marketing, right? So if I don't like to share, through my password through LastPass, because we're humans, we can make a mistake, right? So what I say is, for example, is we have MFA, multiple authentication, with all of our vendors. So we have a video director that does all my ClickFunnels and social media marketing. He have access to those accounts because I added him to it. And then if by any given chance he need access to something that that I was not able to give him access to, he has my credentials to log into it, but he has to call me to ask for the MFA. Does that make sense? So that's just me. Mm-hmm. So I like to take extra precautions and do my check and balances by following that process.
That's great insight as well around leveraging that two-factor or multi-factor authentication. So Stephen asked about using encryption for communications or just encryption in general. Ross, do you have any experience with that or any recommendations around what to use?
In terms of encrypting endpoints like laptops or computers, or emails, what kind of encryption?
Well, so the question specifically, he said emails. So if there's something around emails that you recommend?
Yeah, so if you have an Office 365 E3 or higher license, you already have encryption built right into your license. It's built right into Microsoft Outlook. You can do it on the Mac, you can do it on Windows. You have those capabilities right in there. You can also add this if you have a smaller license that you have through Office 365 as well. If you're not using Office 365, there are lots of anti-spam DR services that provide this capability. We're big Proofpoint users. We love Proofpoint. We use it for all of our healthcare clients. We have encryption being forced out from the firewalls in case they accidentally send EPHI. So there's a lot of advanced things when you talk to your IT people that you can do to make sure that you're staying as protected as possible. The other great thing about a service like that is when we get links in our email, they're all scanned through Proofpoint right out of the gate. So we can't technically click on a bad link because it's got to be scanned by Proofpoint before it'll even connect us to that link through our browser. So having a really good system like that with a good advanced feature set, a good advanced rule set, I think is a huge deterrent from these types of attacks. You see that stuff where Charles was talking about it earlier, sending out wire transfers, those types of things. There's a lot of things you can do to prevent those and mitigate it. You're not going to completely prevent it, but really mitigate those types of things that are coming in. So that would be my recommendation.
That's great. Thank you, Ross. Will, I'm going to come to you with this next one. We've got a question around if we do not have an internal IT department or do not yet work with an outsourced company, what are some simple things that we can do now to protect our data? What are those simple or quick tips that you have for people? Maybe 2 or 3 of them.
One, definitely find some backup solution so you can back up your machines, your servers, whatever data that you have. Definitely doing some type of backup. Making sure you have some type of antivirus, anti-malware, anti-ransomware running on your computers. The consumer grade machines or the consumer grade antivirus is going to definitely be penetrated a lot easier than some of the business grade ones. That's really the biggest 2 things is having some type of antivirus and having some type of backup going for yourself.
That's great. So that makes it real simple, right? Make sure your data is backed up. So in the event of some type of a compromise, you've got a protected copy. And then also make sure that your machines are protected with antivirus. Willie, are there any antivirus or anti-malware software companies that you particularly recommend?
So I jokingly, in maybe the current environment, but I tell people a lot of times antivirus software is a lot like the flu shot. Most of the time you can get the flu shot and not get the flu, but you can still get the flu shot and you can still get the flu. The same with antivirus software, no matter if it's the best, the worst, rated by who, whatever the case may be. Personally, we have good luck and we prefer a piece of software called Bitdefender is a primary antivirus product. And something else that I think in this day and age is important to consider a little bit is, in not getting too nerdy, but a next generation antivirus solution or next generation security solution that's actually looking a little deeper than traditional antivirus. But yeah, the big names that you hear out there, I mean, they all do a decent job, but just keep in mind it's like the flu shot, and you can still get the flu even if you do get the flu shot, no matter what product you choose.
Yeah, it goes back to Pedro's point earlier as multi layers of security. And unfortunately, if you don't have in-house or outsourced IT, it's kind of complex for us on this webinar to share that and really come up with a solution for you. But yeah, multi layers of security is ideal in this day and age.
All right, Sonny, we're going to go to you, and then Pedro, I see your hand. I got you next. So, Sonny, you have something you want to share?
No, just he hit on the point that even the best antivirus, it's not going to tell you you got the virus, right? When you get the virus and it gets past your firewall on your antivirus software, it's not going to then warn you that you do have it. So someone hit on the best prevention is a good backup, right? Have a good backup that has different credentials than you use for everything else. So that even if you do get it on your computer, that can also get your backup. So we'd say backups with different credentials and security than your PC or your server.
Great. Pedro, what you got?
So I was going to say is I've seen cases, and this happened to a client of ours that didn't follow our advice, is that they had our solution, for my next generation endpoint protection that uses artificial intelligence, right? But the keylogger came in, was able to capture the password from a vendor and be able to uninstall the antivirus using that password, then deliver the payload. So that's why going back to the multi-layer approach, and having a strategy, thinking about, like I said before, I'm in the military, so you have to think about drills, what if? And one of the things that everybody mentioned here is backups. I'll just say business continuity, right? Because the ability to get back up to be operational within hours is crucial to a business versus a week or days. You can have backups, but still you're gonna be down for 2 weeks. So think about it. What is your threshold for downtime? What's that pain level looks like? And based on that, you make the decision, man, if I'm down 1 day, I'm gonna lose $5,000, 2 days, 10 grand, or 20 grand, whatever it is. Based on that, you make the decision. But multi-layer strategy across the board, not one thing, like the gentleman really said about the flu shots, analogy. If you do it in that manner, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. You will get hit. So think long-term.
Ross, the question came through around compliance. Do you support any particular industries that are impacted by compliance? And if so, how are they dealing with now working remotely where they weren't before and making sure that those measures are implemented correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. We deal a lot in healthcare, so we work with HIPAA compliance a lot, and HIPAA compliance has been around for quite some time now, and you still have a lot of people who just like to ignore it. But that's changing now today, and we're starting to see not only compliance around healthcare, PCI DSS. I'm sure some of you have heard of this, but just a few days ago, the New York Shield Act went into effect that requires any business with customers that live or work inside of the state of New York to comply with a lot of these cybersecurity requirements that everybody's talking about. So that multi-layered approach it's going to become even more critical, because if you read these laws, and I've read them in depth, the requirements for what you must do during the event of a breach is pretty scary. There's even one that says if more than 5,000 customers in the state of New York are impacted by this, that you're required to contact the local media so that they can report on the breach that you had. So the amount of financial impact that can hit these companies from a lack of being compliant with these laws that are coming out is going to be pretty tremendous. I think the maximum fine from New York Shield is $250,000. And this is just New York. It's going to expand across all these other states. I'm sure we're going to see it here in New Jersey very, very soon. So I'm just tying it back to the multi-layered approach, that this is the best way to protect yourself from all of these things.
That's great insight. Pedro, you got something?
To add to what Rod just said, one final thing: insurance, cyber liability insurance. That is a key component. And one of the issues, the reason I'm bringing it up, and I think it's important, is because when you get hit, and you just like use a common sense approach. You got 10,000 records, you get affected, and that's going to cost you, let's say, $300,000 a month in order to be able to, cover those losses, expenses, and actually to monitor their credit and everything else. A month, your policy covers for 1 million. Do the math. You mean litigation, all these different things are going to hit you hard. You're probably going to go out of business. So, like, talk to your insurance agent. Really go through a scenario. If you got 20,000 records in your database, no matter if they're active or inactive, you need to cover for those. And do the math. There is a formula for this, for example. You do the math and you come up with a figure, and then you plan accordingly. Okay? Don't just, take whatever most insurance agents say. So that's one of the things that's really important to add to that.
Good insight. So we've heard a lot of layers here. We've heard backups. We've heard antivirus. We've heard training and education. We've heard about encryption for important communication. We've also heard about cyber liability insurance. Charles, is there something you wanted to add on top of that?
Yeah, the key component there with what Ross was talking about, the New York Shield Act, is it has some bite to it. So there are fines, there's penalties if you have to reach out to the news media. Tennessee was one of the first states that brought in a breach law that says that you need to notify your clients if you've ever had a data breach. The problem is it has no teeth because there's no penalties, there's no fines. So most companies are just ignoring it. They get a breach and they shut up and they keep on moving about their day and they recover their losses. So a lot of companies, and I'm thinking a lot of states are going to start adapting what they're doing in California, what they did in New York, and GDPR and everything else. But the other thing that I wanted to mention, and I'm not an attorney, I'm not a insurance salesman either, but I do want to bring up a good point about insurance. Insurance is only as good as your due diligence. So if you go out and buy cyber liability, you think you're covered, you're not. You still need to have your policies in place. You need to have your procedures in place. You need to have your clients or your users signing off on things. And the best analogy that I give when I'm doing presentations is a jewelry store. If a jewelry store opened for business, bought insurance, had $2 million worth of jewelry sitting in there in glass cases, they closed up night one, they didn't have an alarm, they didn't have bars on the windows, they didn't have bars on the doors, and somebody broke in, they stole $1 million worth. Would the insurance company cover that? The answer is no. They deny the claim because you didn't do your due diligence. So the phishing that we were talking about earlier, the on-demand training, putting policies in place, BYOD policies, internet usage policies, things of that nature, combining all of those, if you're healthcare, going through a HIPAA risk assessment, so on and so forth, those are doing your due diligence so that in the event that you do get breached, you can rely on that insurance policy.
Well said. So I got a quick round here of questions specifically around this transition to COVID-19. I'm working remotely. I'm curious. We'll start with you, Will. What's the most unique issue or request you've gotten that kind of caught you or your team off guard, or unexpected? We didn't even think that would be a problem that we ran across as a result of this transition that employers are going through. What comes to mind?
It is nothing big, but I think the biggest thing that caught us off guard is clients coming to us and asking us if we have loaner laptops, because a lot of, like Charles said earlier, manufacturing, a lot of nonprofits, they stick with the desktop. And so bombarding us of asking that question, I was not prepared for that. We did have some loaners, but we got wiped out pretty quick. And then, of course, as we all know, we can't get any more laptops in right now. So that's probably the one that caught me off guard the most.
Yeah, that's not something you would normally get. Willie, what about you? Either an issue that came up that was unexpected or a unique request that came through?
No, one of the things, and we kind of hit on this earlier, that I think everybody, is just having to rethink are just the logistics of how they work, though. For example, we have a CPA firm who does a lot of audits of banks. And one of their requirements is they have to provide 10 printed copies to 10 different individuals, and these printed copies are about 300 pages apiece. Didn't account for that when they thought about working at home. So, you know, it's those kind of things that we've actually seen more so since the kind of the peak, I guess, if you will, of people wanting to get set up to work remotely. Now they're working remotely and they're figuring out these kind of logistical difficulties that they really didn't think of just in terms of how they carry out their day-to-day work.
That's well said. Yeah, the physical part. Sonny, what about you? What's something unique or a challenge that came through?
The biggest thing is the remote. It is absolutely the working remote and just getting people set up who aren't used to doing it. The other thing is just the culture, keeping your culture the same as people are used to seeing each other. How do you keep that same? I mean, a lot of these guys, we're all IT companies, so we probably have game rooms, and these guys are all like gamers, and we do fun stuff. It sounds like Will's doing happy hour. I think he said at 5 o'clock still to keep that up. Next week, we're doing a bingo game across teams somehow or another. I'm not sure, but it's keeping your clients and your own company, keeping that company culture you've worked hard to build, to keep that culture while everybody's somewhere else.
Yep, that's a good one too. Ross, what about you? Something unique that came through, or a different issue you guys came across?
Yeah, it was kind of a funny issue that raised a much bigger question. And the issue was, how do I keep my Zoom video running smoothly when my kids are on Netflix? And it got me thinking. I had just read an article on CNBC from Jim Cramer where he referred to what's going on as the stay-at-home economy. And it got me thinking, like, this is a huge fundamental change, and I don't think we're going back to the way things were. I think that the home network is very quickly becoming the most important part of the corporate network. And you're going to see a lot of companies that are asking really tough questions. Do we need to have this much office space? Can we hire people for cheaper rates if we can have them working at home all the time? We've seen that we can do this. We've proven that we have the capability to continue to run our businesses with remote employees. And it's going to make a huge shift in just how cybersecurity works. You know, the off-the-shelf Best Buy home router might not cut it anymore. What do these people have on their home networks? You know, the IoT devices that are everywhere with Alexa and Google and Apple Siri. I mean, we're talking about a nightmare that we're going to have to deal with over the coming months and years because of this dramatic shift that's happening from the virus. So it's scary, but it's also exciting at the same time because it's change, and it means we've got a whole new host of things to deal with.
Yep, there's a lot to tackle. Pedro, what about you in terms of a unique request or a challenge that you guys have come through?
To be honest, we haven't had that many from our clients. The only issue we've been having is just the financial talk, right? The cash flow issues. And we've been trying to help on a case-by-case basis. That's number one. From a remote point of view, we haven't experienced any issues because we facilitate access to our tools to our clients at no cost. So they use our RMM tool with multi-factor authentication and all that. However, if you do have a laptop that connects via VPN, that's okay, as long as you have our full security suite. Aside from that, it's like Roger said, the culture, which is why having that huddle daily, having conversations one-on-one, chatting with your people, making sure that everybody is good, everybody, you know, is motivated, everybody is happy to at least, you know, have a job and come to work. That's huge. So I try to always, you know, bring in some sort of funny joke or something, you know, around it and break the ice with that and then start the conversation from there.
That's good. Charles, what about you? Something come through to you or your team that really puzzled you or stumped you guys that was atypical?
No, nothing that has come through that stumped us. We've seen a lot of like VPN issues, applications not wanting to run across a VPN. People have varying, you know, speeds of internet at home. I think that you're going to see a lot of people increase their bandwidth in the months ahead. But really, you know, we knew this years ago is a lot of applications just won't run over the VPN. But giving them access to files and shares and things of that nature has been beneficial. But one thing that we come to realize when we sent out the first notification of saying, hey, we're willing to help you work remote and we're going to give away our free security stack for anybody that needs a home computer connecting in. We had one client reach out and said, wow, we've been connecting in from our home for a couple of months. And we're like, oh my God. So, you know, it's been wide open and this dangerous, attacks could have been happening. But we're also encouraging our clients to do much what Sunny was talking about, which is interaction with the team and doing that. We've got a Slack channel set up specifically for this. It does trivia a couple of times during the day, and people can post in their answers. I've seen different things that we're suggesting is sending in baby photos of the managers and or people, and then having a contest to see who can pick that. And then we're doing everybody's going to submit a theme song to one individual, and then we're going to guess whose theme song that is for. So just doing stuff that's interactive, that we can keep the guys engaged, and during the daily huddle, it's what are you stuck on? That's the big question right now is, what's the thing that's got you stuck? And it's really been kind of fun watching the team come together. And a guy was having an issue with a VPN for one particular client. And I mean, the guy stayed on for like 15 minutes, and 30 minutes later, the problem was fixed. So the collaboration, I think, is really key. And a lot of times, we're technology guys. We need to go talk to our clients and make sure that they know that they can use these resources and tools. If you don't have Teams, if you want to use Slack, you can sign up for that. It's free. It does require 2FA as well. So, it's a secure platform as well. And, you don't have to have that Microsoft account. So.
That's good. I love the comments you have, and that's where I want to wrap us up on the last question here that came through around that employee culture. So you talk about, I love the baby picture idea. That was great. The theme songs and having those questions. We've done or had members do similar things in like quarterly planning sessions. And I think it's a great reminder that we can do those now remotely, and they have a different meaning to them. Will, you mentioned the happy hour you guys are doing through Zoom. Anything else that either you're doing or some of your clients, the companies you support, are doing to maintain their work cultures?
So what we actually do a 15-minute meeting every day from 9:15 to 9:30. And one of the things I'm doing is on Fridays, I'm asking, we're not talking about business, we're not talking about tickets or anything else. We're individually, I'm asking, how are you doing? How is your family doing? And reassuring them that I'm there for my employees. So I think as an employer, that's what you've got to do. You've got to make sure that the warm and fuzzies there, you're over communicating. I think it's good to communicate all the time, but I think this time, and we've got to over communicate of where we're at. The fears are there with people starting to pay late, people shutting down, are they going to get paychecks? So as your employees, over communicate to them that things are okay, or this is where we're at, or this is what we're doing. Just over communicate.
That's good. Real good. Ross, what about you? Any neat things that you've heard about?
Well, we're in kind of an interesting situation because we don't have an office, and we haven't had one since October. So we were already working remotely when this whole thing began.
So you saw this coming and prepared in advance then, right?
Yes. So I guess you could say that. That makes me look better. Yeah. So we had already set up this platform, and we built it around Microsoft's cloud and Teams and whatnot. So like everybody else said, having those daily meetings, I'm working in sales and marketing most of the time. And so I don't have, generally speaking, have not had a lot of time to jump on with all the engineers and the operations departments. And now I've begun to do that. And I was saying to myself, why didn't I do this before? Why didn't I just take the time? It was only 15, 20 minutes just to participate and listen to what it is they're saying. And what I found is that has connected me a lot more to the overall beat of our company and what we need to do to be successful communicating through remote access and through remote work. So yeah, I mean, I would say take the time to get involved in other areas of your company that maybe you weren't before. Go and talk to those people like Will was saying, over communicate, ask questions, and just be as involved as you possibly can.
That's great. Willie, anything you've heard from a client of yours that is just a fun share for this group about how to maintain that company culture?
Actually improv. We've got some good, and I thought this was a great idea. We have a client who every day for about 20 minutes at the end of the day via Zoom that they're all doing improv with their staff. So that's one thing. But one thing that is important to hit on, and I think is really important for business owners and managers, I do a conference call generally once a week with about 10 or 12 other marketing managers and those kind of roles, I guess, if you will, of other IT companies and other managed service providers. And on the call this week, none of their employers had actually talked to them, and they were actually really scared about is my job safe, is what's going on. So I think that, I can't underscore enough, talking to your people, keeping them in the loop, making them feel like they know what's going on right now is really a key to culture.
That's great. Yeah. And I love that, as we're talking about technical matters, we're still focusing on the behaviors of people, educating them and maintaining that healthy office culture, even when we're not physically in an office. That's critical, both to business success and also from a security perspective, because happy, engaged employees are going to follow and be more attentive to those practices. A neat one that we heard as we coach many businesses, we have a member company that's actually doing like a version of Cribs, where one person in their daily huddle every day is taking their webcam and laptop and walking and giving their team members a tour around their house. And we've actually started doing that. We did that yesterday morning at Petra. I thought it was a great little exercise. In 30 seconds, you learn things about people of, what's in your fridge? What's your, right? It's kind of a fun way to bond and make light of the current situation. So sincerely to the 6 of you on this call, and the several of you that have stayed on for this entire time, thank you so much. I appreciate your generosity, giving back to this community. Charles, you had something you wanted to add real quick?
I just wanted to say we had our first company meeting and everybody showed up. It was 100% virtual. We shared the health of the company. We shared that we're debt free. We've been in business for 32 years. We've got money in the bank. You don't have to worry about your jobs. We're not looking at laying anybody off, and we're marketing like crazy. So just re-encourage your employees and let them know that you're there, that it's stable. They're uncertain, and if they're tuning into the news, they need to hear the good news from you, and share some positive things that have come out. Petra's sending out tons of positive information. I think there was 15 things that were very positive. They hit the news recently, so those are all positive things. You do need to be firing up your teams, being energized, and just sharing that information with them, because they don't know what you know in your head. And sometimes as leaders, we get so tied up in the minutia of running the company and staying focused on making sure everybody does have a job. We don't relay that information to our teams. That's it.
No, that's really well said. Thank you. It's a great segue to where I was going in terms of with Petra Coach. We do have a website that we have posted all of the resources that we're finding and publishing and distributing. This webinar will be up there within the next day or so, the recording of it. It's PetraCoach/COVID-19. As you see, we actually have 5 webinars, one each day next week, all are at 1 p.m. We're seeing a lot of demand for the information on the CARES Act that is currently waiting to be passed through government and signed into law. That's on Monday. And then on Wednesday of next, we also have Putting Your Oxygen Mask On First with Dr. Heidi Hanna, and several others that will be posted to the site later today. As a reminder, we are a group of business coaches looking to help organizations that need it through this crisis. Please feel free to reach out to me directly at ryan@petracoach.com or by going to our website at petracoach.com/COVID-19 for resources. Thank you again to the panelists and to those that attended, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your week.